Quite a few years back, I was working as a guide and administrator at a historical goal, an old prison that had been turned into a museum. It was one of the oldest buildings in town, with a serious reputation among ghost hunters. The place had seen its share of violence over the decades: brutal early days, escapes, fights, and even state-ordered hangings. Ghost stories swirled around it constantly, and honestly, it was easy to believe them while walking those cold stone corridors after hours. The building was full of creaks and drafts, and we had dozens of mannequins dressed in period clothing scattered throughout, some in cells, some in the courtyard, a few looming in hallways, just to give tourists a proper scare. I'd seen plenty of odd things during my time there, but I always chalked them up to the age of the place, local wildlife, or my imagination working overtime in the dark. One winter, when the tourist season had slowed to a crawl, I pulled a tough shift, late closing one night and early opening the next morning. It was pitch black outside, and large parts of the complex had no installed lighting, so I always carried a torch. I'd only had one visitor the entire day, so to fight the boredom, I decided to have a bit of fun. I pulled a spare mannequin from storage, dressed it up in early convict women's clothing, and set it up in the kitchen of the ladies' wing. I positioned it facing away from the door, one arm cradling a mixing bowl and the other holding an old-fashioned egg beater. I made sure it was perfectly stable, then locked up for the night. The next morning, I arrived at 6 a.m., the complex still wrapped in darkness. As I made my way through the circular layout of rooms, I passed the wall that shared the kitchen and froze. A strange scraping noise was coming from the other side. It stopped, then started again, growing louder and faster, now mixed with a rhythmic tapping. My heart picked up pace. I continued around the building, moving slowly toward the kitchen door. Standing outside, the irregular sounds were unmistakable. Instead of walking straight in, I slid open the small viewing hatch and peered through. What I saw made my blood run cold. The mannequin was moving, not just shifting slightly, it was actively tapping one foot up and down, while its arms steadily turned the egg beater in slow, deliberate circles. In the dim light, I could see the mechanical motion clearly. My brain screamed possession or poltergeist. I didn't wait to see if it would turn around. I slammed the hatch shut and sprinted back through the complex as fast as my legs would carry me, not stopping until I reached the main office. I bolted the door, flipped on every single light, and tried to catch my breath. By 10 a.m., when the first tourist of the day arrived, I had almost convinced myself it was a hallucination. The building settles, it was dark, my mind filled in the blanks, that sort of thing. But I still had to open the kitchen for the tour. I hung the back in 5 minutes sign on the front desk and crept quietly toward the kitchen door. I opened the hatch again. The mannequin stood exactly as I had left it, completely still. I breathed a huge sigh of relief, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The instant the door swung open, the mannequin sprang back to life. It began frantically turning the egg beater, its foot tapping wildly against the floor. Broad daylight. No excuses this time. I was alone in an old goal with what looked like a possessed mannequin, and an innocent tourist was about to walk through any minute. Panic surged through me. It's only plaster and papier-mâché, I told myself. I grabbed a heavy meat mallet from the kitchen display and approached the thing with extreme hesitation, ready to smash it to pieces and run. As I got closer, the movements grew faster and more frantic. Heart hammering, I reached out, fully expecting it to turn and attack. The moment I grabbed its arm, the mannequin erupted with a horrible croaking, hissing sound. I nearly jumped out of my skin. But something about that hiss sounded familiar. I looked down into the bowl it was holding. Staring back up at me, head firmly wedged between the beaters of the egg mixer, was a large king skink about 40 centimeters long. The poor lizard had been stuck in the bowl. Every time it tried to run in circles to escape, it spun the beater, which moved the mannequin's arm up and down and made the whole thing vibrate enough to tap its foot on the floor. The terror instantly melted into hysterical laughter. 5 minutes later, I was gently releasing the skink outside in the courtyard, still giggling like an idiot. By the end of the day, that mannequin was safely packed away in storage, just in case. About 3 years ago, my family moved from our old childhood home to a new house about 20 minutes away. It wasn't a huge distance, but it meant changing schools and adjusting to a completely different environment. The silver lining was my new bedroom. It was genuinely cool. It had a loft that hung directly above my bed, about 6 feet up. That's where I'm sitting right now, typing this. The loft is my little sanctuary. Just enough space for my computer, record player, and a couple of other things. Only 3 people could comfortably fit up here. Across from the loft and my bed is a large window overlooking the street and the empty lot on the other side. I almost never open the curtains because the morning sun blazes straight through and turns the whole room into a furnace. Not long after we settled in, we got to know our next-door neighbor, the same guy who owns most of the neighborhood and actually built our house. Once we'd spent some time with his family, they started opening up about what happened during construction. They told us about a random dark car with tinted windows that would pull up some days and just sit there for hours, watching the crew work. If anyone approached to see who it was, the car would speed off. We found it weird, but not exactly scary at the time, so we brushed it off and moved on with life. A few weeks later, our neighbor came over again, this time visibly shaken. He told us that tools had started disappearing from his garage. At first, it was small stuff, so he didn't think much of it. He's a builder, and things get misplaced, but then bigger items vanished. Propane tanks, even a table saw. The final straw was when his gun went missing. Not from the garage, it had been locked inside his basement gun safe, in a house with a full security system. His wife and kids were away, so he had been home alone. The next night, he stayed up to catch whoever was responsible. Around 3 a.m., the same dark car pulled up in front of his house. An average-sized man got out. When my neighbor stepped outside holding a baseball bat, the man didn't panic. He simply got back into the car and drove away slowly, almost like he had been expecting him. By this point, our whole family was on edge. But it didn't end there. About a week later, our neighbor called us in a panic. Someone had left a duffel bag at the entrance to the neighborhood. Inside were all the smaller stolen tools and the gun. Attached was a handwritten note that read, "I wasn't finished with them." That message sent a chill through all of us. Within the next month, we had a full security system installed. For a while, things stayed quiet. All of this had happened around February. Then November rolled around, and the fear came rushing back. One afternoon, my family and I were out walking the trails through the 4 acres of forest behind our house. It's usually peaceful. I ran ahead to catch up with our dog, who had darted after something. When I reached him, he was barking furiously toward the tree line. There, just barely visible through the branches, stood a man. He was staring straight in our direction. I took in every detail I could. Average height and build, clean-shaven, an unusually large nose, short hair, no glasses, dressed in black jeans and a black jacket. Before I could react, he casually turned and walked deeper into the woods, like he hadn't just been caught watching us. I sprinted back to my family, but when we returned together, there was no trace of him. Then came the night in December that still haunts me. It was around 2 a.m. I was up in the loft on Reddit and TeamSpeak with friends. The house was completely silent. Everyone else was asleep. Suddenly, a soft but unmistakable thud came from the big window. My stomach dropped. I quietly climbed down the ladder, crept over, and carefully peeled back the edge of the curtain. There he was, the same man from the woods, standing across the street in the empty lot, staring directly at my window. Our eyes met. For a long, terrifying moment, he just stood there. Then, slowly and deliberately, he turned and walked away into the tree line, keeping eye contact with me the entire time until the darkness swallowed him. I've never moved so fast in my life to make sure every door and window was locked. My wife and I booked a swanky hotel in downtown Pittsburgh, the same one where I'd proposed to her after a fancy dinner. I picked the room specifically for its massive Japanese soaking tub, the kind so deep that even at 6 feet 1 inch, I could barely see over the rim. Our first night there, we were asleep in the king bed when something jolted us both awake. The clock read somewhere around 2 or 3 a.m. To my left, just a few feet away, came a sound, slow, deliberate, unmistakable, like a pencil rolling down a sloped surface. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I talked myself down. Probably just a pencil sliding off a desk. We drifted back to sleep. Morning came, and reality threw a wrench in my tidy explanation. There was no desk in the room, no pencils either, just a couple of capped ballpoint pens, which couldn't possibly make that crisp wooden clatter. And without a desk, there was no sloped surface for anything to roll off of in the first place. It was strange enough that we couldn't stop talking about it over breakfast. I'm not a believer in ghosts, but part of me has always wanted to stumble into something I couldn't explain. Still, I figured there had to be a logical answer, even if ghost pencil was tempting. That wasn't the end of it. That evening, we climbed into the soaking tub together, water up to my chin, laughing and splashing around like we owned the place. February in Pittsburgh is brutal, so this felt like pure luxury. Then, out of nowhere, the buzz of microphone feedback erupted from the next room, that unmistakable hum that comes right before someone makes an announcement. It filled the space, and our hearts dropped into our stomachs. Before we could even react, we heard it. Someone testing the mic, blowing into it. Woof, woof. crystal clear, just like the pencil the night before. I shot out of the tub so fast I nearly slipped, grabbing a towel midair. "That was someone blowing into a microphone," I said, voice shaking. My wife stayed frozen in the water, too spooked to move. I tore through the room looking for speakers, nothing. No grills in the ceiling, no hidden audio system. The only sound device we owned was an iHome dock playing music from my phone. And it definitely wasn't doing that. We had one more night left, riding high on engagement excitement and a healthy dose of, did that really just happen? A week after we got home, curiosity got the better of me, and I emailed the hotel asking about the building's history. Pittsburgh's downtown is ancient by American standards, and sure enough, they wrote back with an answer that made my jaw drop. The building used to be an old telephone factory. Something about that detail just clicked. Suddenly, the pencil sound made sense: drafting tables, blueprints, technical drawings. And the microphone feedback? A PA system, echoing through decades, calling out to workers who'd long since gone home. I grew up in a house that felt alive in all the wrong ways. My parents still live there, in that old creaky place that seems to hold on to its secrets. Over the years, we've collected enough strange experiences to fill a book. Here are some of the ones that have stuck with me the most. My bedroom was tucked away like an annex off another room. You'd walk up the stairs, continue down the hallway, and pass through the front room just to reach my door. None of our dogs or cats would ever go inside. One cat might occasionally poke its head in before quickly backing out, but the rest avoided it completely, as if some invisible line kept them away. In the room right before mine, the one at the end of the hallway, you could regularly hear footsteps. Someone would climb the stairs, walk across the hall, and then the doorknob would turn. The door would swing open. But when you looked, no one was ever there. This happened often enough that someone in the family would witness it about once a month. One night I came home around 2 a.m. and headed to the kitchen for a glass of iced tea. I was standing at the counter when someone sneezed loud and clear right beside me. I didn't even think. I just noped out of the house immediately. The next morning, my mom chewed me out for leaving the refrigerator door wide open. I didn't care. There was no way I was going back in there that night. Another time, my brother, his friend, and I were sitting at the kitchen table playing cards. Suddenly, the back screen door opened, followed by the inside door. My brother and I didn't even flinch. "Hey, Sam, come on in," we called out. My dad had nicknamed the ghost Sam years ago for reasons we still don't fully understand. I got up to close the door and realized the deadbolt was still thrown. I had to unlock it just to shut it. My brother's friend turned pale, stood up, and left. He never came back to our house again. The upstairs toilet would flush by itself every now and then, with no one around. And when I was home alone, the stove would sometimes turn on by itself, heating the kettle until it whistled. This happened at least 4 different times. I'm convinced it was my grandmother messing with me. She used to do exactly that when she was alive. I still catch faint whiffs of her perfume from time to time. When I was 8, I was swimming in the pool by myself. A shadow man walked between 2 trees about 25 feet away, moving with a slow, heavy stride like Bigfoot. I just froze and stared. My mom has seen several shadow people in the yard too, and even more often on the basement steps. As a little kid, I was terrified of my own room. I'd make up every excuse possible to sleep in my parents' bed. My dad worked nights, so I'd crawl in with my mom. One night I woke up and saw a little girl standing in the corner, quietly looking out the window. I screamed bloody murder, and she vanished. I scared my mom half to death. She believed me because she said I wasn't capable of faking that level of terror. The shaking, the pure panic in my voice. Both of my brothers have heard the little girl laugh at different times. All of us have heard voices talking in other rooms, music playing faintly, and footsteps moving around the house when no one was there. We sleep with our TVs on every night just to drown out the sounds. Sometimes I'd wonder if someone had broken in, but I've learned that if the dogs aren't barking, it's probably just the house doing its thing. A lot of our friends who visited would get that unmistakable feeling of being watched. I still feel it sometimes, but I've grown used to it over the years. Despite everything, I personally believe whatever is in that house protects us. There were multiple times the place should have burned to the ground. It's incredibly old, with ancient electrical wiring that had literally burned through the walls in places. The old wooden slats behind the drywall were like kindling; they'd go up in seconds. During renovations, we replaced the insulation, removed those slats, and used them as tinder for our outdoor fireplace. While tearing out the kitchen walls, we also found old medicine bottles hidden inside. Whatever lives there, Sam, the little girl, my grandmother's spirit, or something else, seems to watch over the family. The house is haunted, no doubt about it. But after all these years, it feels less like a curse and more like a strange, protective presence that's simply part of home. This one isn't something that happened to me directly. It's a story I've only ever heard from my grandma, who loves sharing it whenever I visit her. It took place back when my mom was just a little girl, traveling with her 3 younger siblings. One was still a baby, and the other 2 were energetic toddlers. My grandma was flying solo with all 4 kids, and by the time they boarded the plane, she was already beyond exhausted. She managed to get seats in the very back row, settling in with the 2 youngest children while my mom sat in the row ahead with her sister. The flight started off relatively calm, but as the hours stretched on, the kids grew more and more restless. Weaning turned into loud complaints, which quickly escalated into full-blown crying and fidgeting. The noise and chaos filled their little section of the plane, and my grandma felt like she was at her breaking point. She just wanted a moment of peace, maybe even a chance to close her eyes, but that seemed impossible with 4 young children in tow. Just when she thought she couldn't handle another minute, a man sitting directly behind her gently tapped her on the shoulder. My grandma turned around, and he gave her a kind, understanding frown as he took in her tired expression. "Would you like some help calming the kids down?" he asked. In her weary state, she didn't hesitate. She gratefully accepted his offer. Back in those days, people seemed more trusting and willing to help strangers, so she felt comfortable letting him assist. The man quietly handed coloring books over the seat to my mom and her sister, which immediately captured their attention. For the baby, he dangled a colorful toy above the seat, gently entertaining the little one with soft movements. Almost like magic, the restless energy in the rows melted away. The children settled in, focused, and content. My grandma says it was the quietest the kids had been since my mom was born. The entire rest of the flight passed in blissful peace. She was finally able to relax, breathe, and even enjoy a few moments of calm. When the plane landed, my grandma felt a wave of gratitude. She thanked the man warmly and started gathering her children and their belongings, eager to get off and meet up with my grandpa, who was waiting at the gate. She was excited to introduce this helpful stranger to him and tell the story of how he had saved the entire flight from turning into a nightmare. They waited at the gate as passengers streamed off the plane. Since they had been seated in the back rows, the man should have been one of the last to exit. 10 minutes passed, then 15. My grandma kept watching the steady flow of people, growing more puzzled with every passing moment. The man never appeared. She couldn't understand how he could have possibly slipped past them. They had been right in front of him the whole time. Concerned that something might have happened to him, she approached a flight attendant with the passenger manifest. She gave the man's name, which she had learned during their brief conversation. The crew member checked the list carefully, then looked up with a confused expression. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the attendant said, "but there's no one by that name on this flight." To this day, no one in the family has ever been able to explain it. How could a man who sat right behind them, interacted with the children, and helped calm the entire family simply vanish without a trace? My grandma and I both believe he was something more than just an ordinary passenger, perhaps a guardian angel or a kind spirit who appeared exactly when she needed help the most. It's one of those beautiful, unexplainable moments that still gives us chills and a sense of wonder every time we talk about it. Both of these unsettling events happened fairly close together, not long after my grandfather passed away. The timing made everything feel heavier, like some unseen presence was trying to get our attention during those raw, grieving months. The first strange thing started in the kitchen. We have this one particular light fixture above the counter that had always been completely reliable. Never flickered, never gave us any trouble until suddenly, for a solid 3-week stretch, it turned into a nightmare. We'd screw in a fresh bulb, and within just a few days it would burn out. We tried everything, different brands, different wattages, even expensive ones that were supposed to last for years. Box after box ended up in the trash. It didn't matter what we did, the result was always the same. The really odd part was that it was only this one light. Every other light, appliance, and outlet in the entire house worked perfectly fine. No flickering elsewhere, no trip breakers, nothing. We got so fed up that we finally called in an electrician. He checked the wiring, tested for power surges, and examined the fixture itself. After a thorough inspection, he just shrugged and said he couldn't find any explanation. No faulty connections, no issues with the electrical panel. It was as if that single light had decided to rebel all on its own. Then came the night that pushed my mom over the edge. It was around 10 o'clock, the house was quiet, and the kitchen light wasn't even turned on. Suddenly, without any warning, one of the bulbs exploded with a loud, sharp crack. Glass fragments scattered across the counter. My mom, who's always been the biggest skeptic in the family and usually laughs off anything supernatural, actually looked pale and shaken. She kept staring at the fixture like it had personally betrayed her. After that dramatic explosion, the problems stopped as abruptly as they had started. The light has worked normally ever since, without a single issue. The second incident felt even more personal and terrifying because it happened while I was completely alone in the house. My parents had gone to visit my grandma, my late grandfather's wife, to spend some much-needed time with her. I had planned to go with them, but at the last minute I realized I'd completely forgotten about an important online test that was due that day. The course platform hadn't sent any reminders, and I was stuck at home scrambling to finish it. I was upstairs, mentally kicking myself for the stupid mistake and feeling guilty about missing the visit with Grandma when it happened. A deafening crash suddenly erupted from downstairs. It was the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life, like someone had violently slammed the front door open or knocked over heavy furniture. My heart instantly slammed into overdrive. Adrenaline flooded my body in a full fight-or-flight rush. I was legitimately terrified, convinced that an intruder had broken into the house. With trembling hands, I grabbed the biggest knife I could find from the kitchen drawer and slowly made my way downstairs, every step filled with dread. I kept imagining the worst, mentally preparing myself to confront someone if I had to. But when I reached the living room, there was no intruder. Instead, I found my dad's telescope lying on its side on the floor. That telescope is no toy. It's a big, professional-grade instrument, extremely heavy and sturdy, mounted on a solid tripod. It's not the kind of thing that just tips over by itself. I stood there frozen for a moment, trying to make sense of it. All the windows were tightly closed, so wind couldn't have been responsible. Nothing else in the room was disturbed. The only explanation that made any sense was that something or someone had pushed it hard enough to knock it over. What made it even more chilling were the clear drag marks etched into the carpet. The telescope hadn't simply fallen straight down. It had been shoved at least a few inches across the floor before finally tipping over. Those marks were unmistakable. Heart still racing, I searched the entire house room by room, knife in hand, checking every closet, behind every door, even the garage. No one was there. The house was completely empty. I was alone, yet something had clearly moved that heavy telescope. Even now, months later, the memory still sends a cold shiver down my spine. The combination of losing my grandfather and these bizarre events left me wondering if there was more to the world than I'd always believed. I still don't know what to make of it all, but I'll never forget how those moments felt. My 21-month-old daughter has never been a great sleeper. No matter what routines, tricks, or sleep training methods we've tried, she rarely makes it through the night. To help with any fear of the dark, we set up 2 nightlights in her room, a regular warm one across the room behind her dresser, and a soft red one right by her bed. She's at that age where imagination and shadows can start to feel very real, so we wanted to stay ahead of it. For the last couple of weeks, though, her wake-ups had changed. She wasn't just fussy, she was waking up frantic, crying in a way that sounded genuinely terrified. It wasn't her usual tired or scared cry. It was deeper, more desperate, and if I tried to leave the room, it only got worse. 3 nights ago, I jolted awake around 2 a.m. to the distinct sound of a pig snort. It happened twice. I even wondered if I had woken myself up snoring. But neither my wife nor I snore unless we're sick, and we weren't. It was strange, but I brushed it off and went back to sleep. What makes it stick in my mind now is that my daughter has recently started making the exact same pig snort noises. She has a little stuffed pig, but we've never taught her to make that sound. 2 nights ago, the monitor crackled to life around midnight with her cries. I dragged myself into her room. The red nightlight that had been on when we put her down was now unplugged from the wall. I tried soothing her, rocking her gently, but she wouldn't settle. She kept staring over my shoulder, wide-eyed. The door was behind me, so I assumed that's what she was looking at. But no, she was fixed on the glider, the rocking chair in the corner of her room. I glanced back. For the briefest second, I thought I saw a shadow shift near the normal nightlight before melting back into darkness. It's 2 a.m., and my mind is playing tricks, I muttered out loud, trying to convince myself. But a heavy feeling was creeping over me, the unmistakable sense that we weren't alone. Unseen eyes watching. A powerless, vulnerable chill I hadn't felt since an aggressive presence in a friend's house years ago. I tried to keep my voice calm. Is someone here, sweetie? Huh? Her answer was clear and immediate. Where are they? She pointed straight at the glider in the corner. We keep it locked because we barely use it, so I knew it couldn't rock on its own. Still, I looked. There's no one there, baby. Are you sure? Uh-huh. I held her close, patting her back for both our sakes. She patted my shoulder in return. We swayed together for a while, but her eyes never left the glider. After a few more minutes, I asked again, is someone still here? Huh? Where? She pointed to the same spot. That's when I noticed her stuffed pig lying on the floor right next to the glider. She looked absolutely terrified. I ended up bringing her into our bed for the rest of the night. Last night was more of the same. She cried out, but wasn't pacing in her crib. I went in and found the red light unplugged again. I rubbed her back, whispered that everything was okay, and she eventually drifted off, making those sweet, content little sleeping noises. I thought she was finally resting peacefully, but every time I tried to leave, she'd start crying again. She was fidgeting more than usual, abnormally restless for her. She was on her stomach, hands tucked tightly under her body instead of sprawled out like she normally sleeps. I'd gently move one arm out, and she'd quickly tuck it back in. This back and forth went on for about 20 minutes, me rubbing her back, trying to slip away, her waking up. Finally, convinced she was asleep, I headed for the door. Dada? I turned. She was sitting up, pointing directly at the glider. The nightlight lit it clearly now. Nothing was there, except the locking lever was in the unlocked position. A wave of dizziness hit me. My chest tightened, my legs felt heavy, and a loud buzzing filled my head. Fear? Adrenaline? Something else? I don't know. I just grabbed her and brought her straight into our room. We didn't sleep much after that. Afterward, we decided to sell the glider to free up some space. Strangely enough, once it was gone, my daughter, who had spent most of her life co-sleeping with us or on a pallet on our floor, started sleeping in her own room. It only took 3 nights. Was the glider the cause? Probably not entirely, but the timing feels like too much of a coincidence to ignore. When I was 9 or 10, my dad took me along to visit one of his old hunting buddies. My parents were divorced, and my dad lived across the country, so even though I'd known this guy since I was a toddler, we didn't exactly have a lot in common. He was a gun dealer, and back before the internet took over, that meant stacks of catalogs for ordering ammo, magazines, firearms, the whole deal. My dad and his friend could lose hours flipping through those pages, debating what to order next. We arrived early, and my dad promised that after an hour or two, we'd all head to Hardee's for breakfast before going out to shoot claybirds. Problem was, I was a kid with zero interest in guns or hunting, and I got bored fast. I wandered the house, flipping through video game magazines I'd brought along, and somehow that hour or two stretched on and on with no end in sight. Eventually, I went to ask if we were leaving soon, and the friend told me to check the fridge for something to eat. I dug through it and found nothing appealing, but on the kitchen table sat a perfect-looking apple. Good enough, I figured. Just as I picked it up and was about to take a bite, his wife walked into the room and stopped me cold. "Don't eat that. Everything in that bowl is wax." I thanked her for the heads up and went back to wandering, killing time. About 30 minutes later, I headed down to the basement where they were still buried in catalogs and asked again when we were finally leaving. The friend asked if I was still hungry after raiding their kitchen. I told him I'd almost eaten an apple, but his wife had warned me it was fake. Dead silence. Both men just stared at me. After what felt like a full 20 seconds, my dad quietly told me his friend's wife had passed away recently. I went back through the house looking for her, half expecting to prove they were just messing with me. She wasn't anywhere. 30 years later, right up until he died, my dad still insisted I must have imagined the whole thing, but I know what I heard. She told me not to eat the wax fruit. It's not exactly creepy, but my partner and I still find ourselves circling back to it years later, completely baffled. There's no explanation, just an unsettling supernatural thread, or the wildest coincidence imaginable. My Nana has lived in a nursing home for about a decade now. After a stroke, she's not fully present mentally. She recognizes us, lights up when we visit, but often slips into a different time, talking as if she's living in memories from decades ago. It breaks my heart, because growing up, she and I were inseparable. My parents worked constantly, so she practically raised me. She always knew when I was lying. She could sense when I was sick, even from miles away. We're eerily alike, same personality, same face. There's a photo of her at 21 that could pass as a picture of me. I loved her fiercely, and when I started dating my now husband in college, she was one of the first people I introduced him to. He's from a different country than me, and I've since moved there to be with him. A few years into our relationship, my visa was about to expire, and getting married became the practical solution for staying together long term. But we were young and impulsive, fresh out of university, so instead of a big announcement, we eloped quietly at a courthouse. In his country, the legal marriage and the wedding ceremony are separate events anyway. So, our plan was simple. Get legally married now, keep it secret, and throw the real wedding later. No one knew. We were giddy about having this secret just between the two of us. Looking back, it was a ridiculously unnecessary thing to hide. Nobody would have cared. But we were young and a little dramatic. Not long after, we flew to my home country to visit my parents and announce our engagement, conveniently leaving out the part where we were already married. My dad picked us up from the airport, and during the drive, he mentioned something strange. A few days earlier, the exact day we'd eloped, my Nana had been in a panic during his visit. She'd told the entire family that she'd seen it in a dream. I had eloped and was now married. Everyone brushed it off, assuming it was just confusion from the stroke. But she wouldn't drop it. She was unusually lucid, raising her voice in a way she hadn't since before her stroke. My dad found the whole thing endearing, just Nana worrying about me, he thought. My husband and I went dead silent in the car. I felt the blood drain from my face. There was no way she could have known. Not really. But somehow she did. A few days later, we visited her. She had no memory of the outburst at all. She was simply overjoyed to hear we were, quote, engaged. We eventually had our real wedding, and to this day, no one in my family knows we were already legally married beforehand. No one except, somehow, my Nana. This happened in the summer of 2004 when I was about 14 years old. My family had just bought a brand new house in a very small, two-street guard-gated community of tract McMansions. It was located at the bottom of a canyon about 30 minutes north of Los Angeles that is known for its sharply winding roads. People got into accidents on those roads all the time. It was not incredibly uncommon for me to wake up in the night to the sounds of screeching brakes or the thundering echo of a crash. The house itself was shaped like a sideways U. The front door and two rooms we called the side rooms took up the front line. The garage extended off the back line of the house near the kitchen and living room area, with a long driveway curving around the side of the house to it. Glass French doors lined a courtyard on the inside of the U, which is exactly where the stairs were located. One night, one of my best friends who lived up the street walked over to hang out with my sisters and me. He brought his new Ouija board. My mom freaked out and would not let it in the house because she is very superstitious. Because of that, we decided to play with it right on our driveway. We talked to a ghost and asked where it had died. The planchette spelled out the name of the canyon we lived in. We asked how it died, and it spelled out car. My friend then asked, despite my protests, if the ghost lived on my property. It said yes. I told myself that it was just my friend dicking around, and that ghosts are not real. I have since had friends into paranormal stuff tell me that Ouija boards are bullshit, so maybe I was just more perceptive after that night. But the shit that happened next was real and scary. A couple of days later, my family went to the beach. I had to stay home because I was doing a correspondence course for summer school and was behind on homework. I always felt spooked when I was home alone because the house was so big and echoey. I decided to do my homework sitting right on the stairs. It was the most central and bright place in the house, and I could see most of the rooms through the glass doors. I had been sitting there a while when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone dressed in white walk past the courtyard and into the garage. We were still having light work done on the house, so I figured my mom had forgotten to tell me that the painters were coming that day. I got up to go make sure they had everything they needed. Upon standing and getting a full view of the garage door, I realized it was completely closed. But I know I had just seen somebody walk straight in there. Just then, I heard my normally very calm dogs freaking out in the backyard. I ran outside to see what was up, only to find them barking furiously at a wall in our side yard. As I was attempting to calm them down, I heard loud clattering and banging coming from inside the house, and then sudden silence. Every hair on my body was standing on edge, and I felt like I had been dunked in ice water. At this point, I was pretty positive I was being robbed. I ran out the side gate and sprinted as fast as I could to my neighbors, who were on their lawn across the street. I explained through tearful gasps what I had seen and heard. The neighbor's wife called my family and told them to come home since I was obviously distressed. The neighbor grabbed a golf club and went back to the house with me to check it out, instead of just calling the police like I had wanted to. They thought I had just spooked myself and overreacted. They did not really believe there was anyone in the house, because it was a very safe community. They also noticed, as I had failed to earlier, that there were no strange cars in my driveway or on the street. We had a clear view of my house from the neighbors, so we would have seen if anyone had driven away. When we got inside, we found that every closet and cupboard on the inside of the first story of the house was wide open. On top of that, every single chair had been moved straight back, exactly 3 feet from its original place. It was the weirdest thing I have ever seen. Nothing had been rummaged through, nothing was missing, and no one was there. We called the front gate, and the guard swore that no one who did not live in the community had gone in or out yet that day. The time that had elapsed between me going into my backyard and returning with my neighbor could not have been more than 5 minutes or so. It would have taken much longer than that for a person to move all of the chairs in so precise a manner. We are talking 8 chairs in the dining room, 6 around the kitchen table, and 4 bar stools at an island in the kitchen, all moved the exact same way and all heavy wood. We would have seen them leave, even if they somehow had the time. My parents got home and decided not to bug the police since nothing was missing or damaged. They chalked it up to a neighborhood kid pulling a prank, even though I knew every kid who lived there, and they all swore they had not done it, and we would have seen them if they had. Nothing that big ever occurred again, but smaller things occurred throughout the time we lived there. My sister swears to this day that the medicine cabinet in her bathroom would slam open and closed on its own occasionally. My older brother, a big guy who is not easily scared, would sleep on the couch in one of the front rooms when he was visiting from school. The first few times it happened, he would wake me up in the middle of the night looking visibly shaken. He said someone was trying to get in the front door and that the knob was rattling violently. We looked out my window, which was directly above the front door, but no one was ever there. He was so freaked out that he begged me to let him sleep in my room. After a while, I would just wake up in the morning to find him sleeping on my trundle bed sometimes. We both knew why, so there was no need to wake me up every time it happened. We moved a few years later and have not had an experience like that since.